Well, hello. How is everyone? A little bit late this week. An extra day. Let's get rid of that. Okay, I'm using a new microphone. Let me know in chat if it's all right and doesn't sound mad. Let's have a quick look and see who's here. So we've got Kate, Revo, and Vicky. Glad you're here, Vic. Believe you're the one doing the sermon this week. So that'll be quite cool. So yeah, welcome. Very busy week this week. That's why I couldn't make it last night. I had equipment not set up and 3 days mad of actually doing some real work with this sort of tech for a change, which is really cool. And I'm glad to say that it went really well for a first commercial shoot. So that's good. Sounds good to me, Alex. Thanks, Kate. You're a star. So this week, obedience. I've got a Revo. We could be talking all night about this. I think from my perspective, I'm just not very obedient. I'm not very good at being told what to do. Yes, I'm preaching. Let's bring this in. Sounds good too on that. Let's have a quick look. Yes, I'm preaching obedience, which is a laugh. A laugh. Okay. Is my audio in sync with my mouth? Is it synchronized? Let's hope so. Oh well. I'm not going to mess with it. You'll have to put up with it. It's one of them weeks. Right, let's drop that. Okay, if you're lurking, you're more than welcome. And you don't have to announce yourself. I'm just welcome for being here, whether you're a Christian or not. It doesn't matter. We're here to have a bit of fun. Have a quick look at last week's sermon and any comments from that. And try and pull some stuff together for this week's theme, which Vicky's going to do. Hang on. Let's have a look at that. I laugh because I'm not obedient by nature. You don't say. Figured that out. Right, don't forget whilst you're here, do the subscribe thing. Thumb up. We want to get that algorithm working for us. And don't forget, if you have subscribed, to click that notification bell. So that's cool. So before we start on obedience, let's have a look at Rob's sermon from last week, shall we? Let's make sure it's going to start at the beginning and not at the end. Yeah, that will. Right, let's have a go. So this was on temptation.
Reading and sermon.
This morning's reading is taken from the 4th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, beginning at the 1st verse. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing at all during those days, and when they were over, he was famished. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread." Jesus answered him, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone." Then the devil led him up and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And the devil said to him, "To you I will give their glory and all its authority, for it has been given over to me, and I give it to anyone I please. If you then will worship me, it will all be yours." Jesus answered him, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil took him to Jerusalem and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you do not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is said, do not put the Lord your God to the test." When the devil had finished every test, he departed from him until an opportune time. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. A man once became very annoyed with his wife for always coming back with a new dress each time she went out shopping. He said she must be more concerned about the family finances and resist any more purchases. She said it was very difficult, as the devil was always tempting her. Her husband replied, "You must say to the devil next time, "Get thee behind me, Satan." The next week she came back from shopping with yet another new dress. Her husband was furious. "Didn't you tell the devil to get behind you, as I said?" His wife replied, "I did, but he went behind me and whispered in my ear, 'It looks just as good from the back as it did from the front.'" A 3-year-old entered the kitchen when his mother was busy elsewhere in the house. He pulled the kitchen chair over to the worktop and climbed up on it. Then he took the lid off the biscuit jar and had just got the biscuits to his mouth when his mother entered the room and demanded to know what he was doing. The 3-year-old looked at her with big innocent eyes and said, "I just climbed up here to smell the biscuits and my tooth got caught on one of them." When we allow ourselves to be overcome by temptation, it seems to be part of our human nature to try to explain away our action. We refer to the story of how Adam and Eve fell from grace in the Garden of Eden. They'd been caught eating fruit from a tree they'd been forbidden to eat. And now God was calling them to account. Adam said, "The woman you gave me to be with me gave me the fruit from the tree, and I ate." Eve said, "The serpent tricked me, and I ate." So you see how they both try to point the finger elsewhere. On this first Sunday in Lent, we are traditionally asked to think about this whole problem of temptation and how we can overcome it. We take as our model Jesus himself, who, as our reading this morning tells us, was led out into the wilderness by the Spirit to be tempted by the devil. During our online discussion on Thursday evening, Peter very helpfully pointed us to some words from the letter of James. The letter of James is a marvellously practical letter about living the Christian life, and it's quite early on in the letter. James has this to say about temptation. "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, the person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When tempted, no one should say, 'God is tempting me,' for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. But after the desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death." Let's try to unpack some of that. First of all, James tells us that the person who stands firm against temptation is happy or blessed, because that person receives the new life that God has promised to those who love him. The more we stand firm and resist temptation, the more the Holy Spirit can establish the new life which God desires for us to have. Jesus identifies the source of our temptations. If a person is tempted by such trials, he must not say, "This temptation comes from God," for God himself cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one. So temptation does not come from God. So where does it come from? It comes from our old nature, that fallen nature that we share with Adam. When we become Christians, when we're born again, we're given a new nature. God breathed his Holy Spirit into our hearts, and the Holy Spirit's role now and purpose is to reproduce the life of Jesus in us. But we should never forget that our lower nature was not eradicated when we are born again. The Christian life is a continual struggle between the flesh and the spirit. It is not free will that wins this battle, but God's grace. And Satan is always trying to appeal to our lower nature and encouraging it to reassert itself. It's important at this point to remind ourselves that temptation is not of itself a sin. We've all been tempted or inveigled, probably several times a day, as Jesus himself was tempted. He was human in the same way as we are human, but he stood firm against that temptation. And James goes on to spell out what will happen if we do not follow that example. It will lead to sin, which will lead to death. So standing firm against temptation is very important. It has consequences for us if we do not. So how then can we stand firm against temptation? Lent is a good time to think about this. We need to arm ourselves with the full armour of God, which Paul describes in his letter to the church at Ephesus. We need to gird ourselves with the belt of truth. Let our yes be yes and our no mean no. We need the breastplate of righteousness. We need to be shod with the gospel message. We need the shield of faith and the helmet of salvation so that we can resist the devil's lies. And we need to take the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. It's interesting to note that Jesus resisted each one of the devil's temptations by appealing directly to Scripture. If we're going to be effective against temptation, we need to know our Bibles. In summary then, temptation is real and we are called to resist it. To resist temptation, we must understand what temptation is. We must predetermine in our minds that we will not give in to temptation and sin against God. We must rely upon the strength of God to help us overcome temptation. So this morning, if you feel you've been losing the battle against temptation, simply ask God to help you. With the Lord's help, you can conquer Satan and every temptation he throws at you.
There you go. So, I popped the number up there. I should have said before we started, if anyone wants to phone up and talk to me, there's the number. Give me a shout. Revo's on the switchboard. So if you want to talk to me, it's easier, keep better track than chat. Anyway, I thought that was dead interesting. The very first point that stuck with me actually struck me about obedience, about the fact that the bloke's wife went and got a new dress. She was tempted by the devil. But he said, you didn't do what I told you. I thought, well, okay, that's a bit of obedience there, isn't it? You know? Don't know, anyone else who might have done the obey thing in their marriage vows? Well, okay. So yeah, interesting. Always quite like Rob's sermons. So yeah, if anyone wants to call in, talk about that, tell me what they thought. Did they discover anything new from that sermon this time than when they heard on Sunday morning? It's interesting, isn't it, doing this on a Friday night? I'm very grateful that you guys have come out on a Friday night, because normally you'd all be out partying, wouldn't you, clearly, to join me tonight because I was absent yesterday. So, do we think that Rob summed that up pretty well? I think he did, didn't he? Certainly from a biblical perspective. So, any comments in chat for that? If not, I'm going to swiftly move on to obedience and what that has made me think about with obedience. I'll give you a sec. No? Okay, right. I'll leave the number up as we chat. Oh, hang on. Let's have a little look. Here comes Vicky. I noticed a strong link between obedience and resisting temptation in Rob's sermon. Yeah. There's a bit towards my end bit, so come on to that a little bit later. Yeah, absolutely. Because we'll talk about obedience and what it means biblically towards the end. In fact, Vicky, jump on the phone call in a bit when we get to, I don't know, towards sort of looking at the biblical sense of this later on in the show, and we can talk about that. Just thinking about Adam and Eve. Yeah, absolutely. There is that direct correlation. They weren't obedient and they were tempted. And then, of course, they blamed each other and the snake and everyone else. Right. Let's drop that. So, what do people think about when they think of obedience? I was thinking children, animals. That's how I sort of started thinking about this. Doggos, obedience of dogs. Then I went really dark on it and I started thinking about group psychology, obedience and governments, and all of that sort of stuff. And I came across the prisoner and guard experiment done in 1971 at Stanford University. Employers and government, yeah, definitely government, eh? See, I find this interesting with regards to obedience and rules. How the rules kind of look into that. Certainly in society, rules and kind of regulations that we kind of been put in place really to maintain structure in our society. But yeah, I was thinking about this thing where obedience to authority, and I guess that covers employers and government, that you can kind of be persuaded to do things that perhaps you shouldn't if there's an evil intent that sits behind it. So I don't know if anyone knows about the prisoner and the guards experiment from the early 70s, where they took 24 young people, so 18, 19 years of age, and they split them 12 as prisoners and 12 as guards. And they said to the guards that the experiment was really to find out how the prisoners react, but their only role was to act like real guards and be quite severe. And the whole thing was closed down after 6 days because the prisoners were being so kind of like badly treated by these guards. And it was almost like this free reign by the people who were running the experiment to the guards to enable them to sort of do what they kind of felt. And it's kind of it's almost like this the shadow, isn't it? We talked about the shadow in us, the bad things that we can do. And it's almost like this, through obedience, you can do really, really terrible things. There's another one as well with the Milgram experiment, which is where they were giving electric shocks to people, which I thought was quite interesting. Let's have a quick look. I'll come to that in a sec. There's another comment came whizzing in just before that, so let's just get that one. So yeah, I've read about those experiments. Awful results. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's cancel that one. Then it was this one, the law and parenting. Yeah. The law, I suppose, about controlling society. Parenting really is, isn't it, in that sense of trying to teach your kids to do the right thing and learn to do the right thing. We often see kids that have been probably the product of bad parenting, don't we? They're the ones we hear about anyway that aren't doing particularly well. It's obviously easy to blame the kids. I often think, well, I think the parents might have had something to do with it. So yeah. I was just following orders, absolutely, and we can go back to probably the Second World War and what happened in Germany. Germany's a classic example, I think, of this group mentality, obedience to the fascist regime at the time. I think that it's interesting how obedience works. It's almost like there was a couple of things I was reading about it. Is that in the sense of being sold that this is the right thing to do, people can make people do incredibly awful things. Yeah. Yeah, that's the one I just mentioned. So, yeah, there's another experiment about giving people electric shocks. So, yeah, that was the Milgram experiment done in Yale in 1963. So, yeah, they were telling people that I think up to level 7 was like really, really terrible, and people were giving electric shocks up to 10. And you kind of think, that's amazing, isn't it? People can do that sort of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, there's a bit on the psychology stuff on obedience and stuff. So it's interesting. There was a couple of points about obedience or levels of obedience, and obedience is kind of almost the sense that it always comes from a higher authority: parents, the law, governments, police, clergy. Perhaps you could argue that. I think you'd be a bit obedient to clergy. I guess at the end of the day, they are deemed an authority. And the other thing is conformity, which conformity tends to come from an equal footing. So rather than you are submitting to a higher authority, conformity is about doing something because you agree with that. So what was that comment before? I don't think it was my comment, wasn't it? Oh, here you go. This is kind of what I'm about to speak about anyway. I think we often have to obey rules for our own or others' safety. It gets more difficult when it's not so clear why we have to follow the rules. Yeah, it kind of leads on to the obvious next one. We have to be careful when we talk about COVID. We're not making any opinions about COVID at all. Because we don't want to be taken down off YouTube. We've got to be careful what we say. But I was about to talk about rules, so Revo's just picked up on that point. I agree that it should be rules, and I come from a bit of a procedurised background, so having worked in IT for a million years, everything has rules and has order, and I think partly with my ASD, it's the practical sense in which I kind of operate, that I operate within the rules. However, I'm not the most obedient person in the world. You can ask Revo that. Not that she asks me or tells me to do anything. Not really. We don't really tell each other to do anything. But yeah, rules are there for a purpose, aren't they? But I suspect that the whole concept of rules and obedience must come from a sense of respecting the authority to which that comes from. I was trying to think about this as well. So, let's see what this is from Vicky. Let's put that up as well. I can sit there anyway. Do we conform to group norms? Do we conform to group norms? Don't know. It's a bit. Can you elaborate a bit on that question? Well, you said, although you followed up with this. Let's see if I can figure out how you're trying to put this across. And we don't all agree amongst ourselves anyway. That's true. But do we conform to group norms? If that's we obey people but conform to norms. Norms. So when you're talking about norms, you're talking about what's a perceived given as what's right in society. That the right thing is not I suppose not to run naked down the street. Is that that's not normal, is it? So we don't do that? Is that what you mean by norms? Is there a rule about that? Is there some sort of obedience thing that's not allowed? Sure, people do it, but I think we do. It just all becomes part of the society thing, doesn't it? That we have these norms. Yes, norms are what we decide are the right thing to do. Yeah. I'm just thinking about that. It's an interesting point because I guess even in the sense of group mentality, what's considered normal, although we're all a bit weird, aren't we, sometimes, and don't want to be the norm. as we develop, I suppose, in our lives, and this is considered normal. When somebody does something that's, I guess, abnormal, it looks a bit weird, doesn't it? Actually, I remember Revo doing a preach about this. She did a preach about how we do things that, this is amazing. Elaine, I've managed to remember all of your sermons. This is where we kind of justify some of our actions because it kind of seems okay to do so because society does it. And yet actually when we look at it and think about it, it's, yeah, that's not right. We shouldn't be doing those sort of things. And I guess in some sense as well with society, we've allowed things to become the norm. It's got to be questionable, isn't it? Let's go back to that. We obey people but conform to norms. But we only obey people we respect, I think. See, I was trying to think about this. Oh, go on, what we go here? See what this one is. There are times when we are all expected to do things like queuing. In Britain, very much so, and I think that's a typical example of our society because it's a very British thing to queue. So I'm not sure if that works for all, I say societies, but all sort of cultures and stuff. People don't queue. I don't know. Oh look, we've got a call. Let me just have a quick listen. Hello. Hello. It's just not working again. Have you come through to me? Can you hear me, Elaine? No. Okay. Vicky, you want to try that again? In fact, Vicky, you could call me direct. Just call the studio. See if that works. Oh, I'll carry on. I think Vic will come through in a sec. So, what was I saying? Queuing. Totally lost my thread there. So yeah, queuing. Very British. That's really an interesting point, isn't it? That all cultures have different things that they become consider norms. Don't know. See, and actually, it's like the Germans, isn't it? With the beach towels on holiday. No, that's not a obedience thing. I'm going off on one here, aren't I? So you know, yeah. Why they put the beach towels out at 3 a.m. so they can get the best seats? That's a cultural thing. It's nothing to do with obedience, is it? No, but is obedience always to do with order? I don't think so. I think especially when you're... Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say. Yeah, especially when you're trying to say parenting and stuff. Not that I can say I'm particularly great at that. Right. Answer. Hello. Hello. Hello, is that it? I can hear you now. I can hear you. Don't know. Should we chat? Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think Revo transferred herself. I don't know. We'll have to have a think about this. It sort of went wrong a bit last week. Anyway, ready to go live? Let's go live. Right, everyone.
Okay.
Here's Vicky. Hello, Vicky. Come on, talk to me. Tell me what's exciting in your mind right now about what we're talking about.
Writing the sermon. Yes. So, yeah, I wasn't expecting that one, that we're all talking about this difference between conforming I've come on the phone because it's easier to talk to you than to try and do it in the chat.
Absolutely.
Right. So what I was talking about and what Elaine has been talking about as well is conforming to things. We grow up learning how to behave from our families, don't we?
We do.
And we don't think about it most of the time. And it's only when we meet somebody who doesn't do it our way that we realise there is a difference. There is a different way.
Yeah, unless, of course, you think about the teenage years when you start to become nonconformist because...
Well, that's right, yes. You choose your own...
Yeah.
Yeah, but you start conforming to a different group, don't you? You start conforming to your peers at that point.
Yeah.
You go around in a gang and you conform to them and their norms then, don't you? Which is... And that's fun because it's different than your family's norms.
Yeah. I agree with that.
But that's different than obeying somebody. And I think Elaine's just put up, she thinks obedience is about accepting someone else's view or rule over what you might want to do. Whereas there's something very external about obedience, isn't there? Whereas conforming, you might not even notice you do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was the thing when I was reading about this before, is the conformity kind of comes from an equal place. So let's take that example of your teenage years that you start conforming with your peers.
Yeah, that's right. You're not obeying them, but you're all deciding to dress the same, behave the same.
Yeah. But that I suppose that concept of conforming is because it helps you to fit in.
Yes. We want to be part of a tribe, don't we?
Yeah, tribal. I like that one. So, but it's interesting with the obedience thing is that, again, it has to come from a status of respect. You know, if someone says you're to do this, I mean, do you want to carry on chain? I'm happy to carry on chain.
Sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that came up when me and Elaine were talking there, she mentioned the armed forces.
Yes.
So that was a very good one.
Yeah.
Because, well-oiled machine. Trained killers and all that sort of stuff, because they don't want people to ask any questions. They just want you to do what you're ordered to do.
Yeah.
And that's obedience.
Yeah, that's right. And not think about who you're shooting.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting one because, of course, sometimes you wonder. See, I was thinking about this. You remember when the truckers were doing the protesting in Canada. Yeah, in Ontario. And they were telling the police, and there was some police actually sort of piped up and said, I agree with the truckers and stuff. See, it must be a really difficult position when you're fulfilling a role like military or some sort of role of authority, and you don't agree with what you're being asked to do.
Yeah. And it was a classic thing, wasn't there, in the First World War with the Russian soldiers, when they'd gone through the Communist Revolution and they didn't obey because they had, they believed Marx, that they were all equal.
Right. So that's...
Yeah. So there's real trouble if your soldiers don't utterly obey their officers.
Is that when they turn around and said, "Get back in there, or we're going to shoot you"? Well, that's
what you have to do, isn't it? That's what happens.
That definitely happened in Russia. Is that like if you turn round, we're going to shoot you? So it's like, how awful is that? You've been conscripted or whatever to join something, and through fear, it's just awful, isn't it? But I think the point I'm just thinking
that's the same today, isn't it? Those soldiers going into Ukraine, they won't all believe in that war, will they? But they have to obey.
That must be it. That must be... Actually, I wonder if that's changing. I wonder how many people do go into the military and then actually have to deal with... I mean, I know that soldier is supposed to be the most stressful job in the world. Out of all jobs, soldier is the one I remember that comes up top. Is where you'll find yourself in a position of something you disagree with.
Yeah. Yeah.
That must be terrible.
That's right. It is.
That must be an absolute terrible thing.
Yeah. And you get court-martialed. I mean, people do get court-martialed for it, don't they, for disobeying orders.
Especially
or mutinying.
Especially when you understand why countries go to war, fundamentally for power and greed. Yeah?
Yeah.
On
yeah,
both
that's
sides.
right.
It's all the same
Yeah.
thing in my book.
Not always, but you mostly, yeah.
Fundamentally, it's all about that, isn't it? It's always about that.
Well, sometimes you just have to fight to stop being invaded. You know, I wouldn't say the Ukrainians are fighting against the Russians for greed.
No. But the cause of it is about power. Fundamentally,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying
Yeah,
the Ukrainians.
Putin wants something, yeah.
So whether it's Putin wanting position stronghold of Ukraine, or NATO pushing towards Russia, there's these complex situations all surround big money, power, and greed. Yeah. So you end up then fighting in a war where you're stepping up for something that you just totally disagree with. I wonder if that's going to. Maybe not. Maybe people just say, no. That's it. You're in it. You're a soldier for your country, and that's what you do. I mean, there must be lots of stories about people. Maybe you don't hear about them. People that just said, no, I can't do this war. You think about Vietnam and stuff, and people that didn't go.
Yes, they did, and they got shot or imprisoned. Yeah.
And here we are looking back on the Vietnam War and saying what a disaster, it should never have happened.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And there was an awful lot of drug taking as well.
Oh yeah.
Trying to
tons of it.
Block it all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Vicky.
Okay.
Good. Where we at? Oh, actually, yeah. Okay. I'll troop on. Maybe chat to you again in the next 5-10 minutes. Okay. Cheers, Vicky.
Okay. Bye.
Right. That was a good one. Let's have a look at this. So Revo's coming with, I suppose the police are there to enforce obedience. Are you talking about that with regards to the police in Ontario, or are you talking in general? I suppose, yes, they are, and they're set and governed by rules and laws as well. Isn't that interesting? This is why this has worked out, that we're talking about people doing things that they think, actually, do I agree with that? So I've got an example of what, when I first got into film, and I'd end up explaining to people and having this conversation with them about something I was hoping to get them to do if I'm directing something. And it was ended up in a great big conversation. I thought, why am I having these conversations with people? I'm supposed to be directing. So I kind of got fed up of that, and I just told them what I wanted them to do. And I suppose that was kind of, you're here for a job. I don't want to debate it. Just do this, because that's what I'm trying to do. So that was one thing that kind of came up for me about really people's skill sets and what they know. And if you end up in a bit of a bun fight because someone starts questioning your authority about what you're doing, that could be very frustrating. Yeah, that's those people that know better than you, innit? Right, let's see what this is. What was the last one? Let's put what was the last one? It wasn't that one. Oh, there's a green dot. That helps me. I think it's usually easier to obey rules or the law than to obey someone's wishes. Yeah, in a simplistic sense, yeah, but again, it does depend on what that person means to you. See, that's a difficult thing, isn't it? I've just made me think about people who kind of have this euthanasia thoughts. Do you know what I mean? About people who support people that perhaps want to end their lives and stuff. Of course, we have laws and rules and that in this country. Very, very difficult subject to talk about. But I suspect there's a lot of people that do things that break the obedience or the rules based on the desires of somebody they have huge respect or love for. That's an interesting point. Where are we? Right, I'm going to talk about the Bible in a sec. But would you break the law for someone you loved? Depends what it is. I suspect people do. Police in general, yeah. Okay, so look, Kate's coming with a comment. People seem to only obey that which is beneficial to themselves and adapt everything else. She don't say much, does she? And then she puts a blinder with that. Absolutely. And, yeah, it's endemic in every one of us, isn't it? If it's beneficial to me, I'll do it. And if it's not, I won't. Or I'll adapt it or change it or whatever. Let's have a look at this one. I agree with Kathleen. That is why we need police and courts to enforce laws. Yeah. We do. Even though, in America, they tried to defund the police, didn't they? Don't need them. What? What was that all about? Yeah, we don't need the police. Let's defund them. Or what people talk about with regards to Canada invoking the Emergencies Act for protesting and stopping people's bank accounts. It's a bit weird, isn't it? Because they're terrorists, of course, and yeah, that sort of stuff. So, biblical stuff. Right, so I looked up and thought, right, what is it to obey biblically? If anyone wants to jump on the phone, I'll hopefully Revo. Actually, I wonder if I can... I might change this next week. The phone just comes straight to me. I don't know. It will then queue anyway. Yeah. The reason why I go through Revo is because in case some weirdo phones up and Elaine can screen them, because I don't really want to screen people live. So yeah, Bible, hear, trust, submit and surrender. Listen, trust, submit and surrender. They were the key words that I got about obedience in biblical terms. So we listen to what we're being taught, we trust what we're being taught, we submit to that, and we surrender to that. So why is it that obedience is important in faith? And how obedient are we all? We get it wrong, because of course we're sinners and we're rubbish at all that stuff. Even though we say we're good, but we're not really. We're all rubbish. But obedience in faith. Come on, someone put up a comment about obedience in faith. I want to hear what you need to say about it. I'll tell you one thing about obedience, I think, is when you listen to somebody who you trust, who then kind of double crosses you, or they're manipulating that authority for their own good. That's really awful, isn't it? Well, here we go. Where's my mouse gone? There it is. Vicky. I think obedience to God depends on our trust in the goodness and love of God. Yes. See, that's interesting, because that's kind of... I was thinking about this bit earlier as well, and I think this is why people can lose faith. And this is really difficult, and I'm sure people get this, but when you have something happen to you or happen to someone you love, something that's pretty terrible, and here we are, all trusting in the Lord, and He's going to look out for us, and everything's going to be all gravy and wonderful, and then it doesn't work out that way. You can appreciate why people end up resenting the faith. And I think, when I think about that, we've got another couple in. Hang on, let's get these in. Hold on. Obedience in faith is knowing that Christ will never let you down. Yeah, I'm going to come absolutely to that. And what have we got here for Revo? It's different to obedience to the law. It's different to obedience to the law. It's different to obedience to the law or to a person because of who doing the asking. Today my dyslexia's kicked in a bit there. Let me come back to that. I'm gonna go back to this one. So obedience in faith is knowing that Christ will never let you down. That's the key, isn't it? It's because the question is how do you consider the crap that goes on in the world and to us as being something that Christ has done? See, I said this earlier, I said this a while back. I don't know if I said it on stream. I'm sure I did. Actually, it was about prayer. Yeah. When I stopped praying for things that I wanted and just prayed for God's will. Because I recognise that certain things that go on in my life aren't particularly brilliant. And I kind of look at that and think, well, what's the blessing in it? And this is pretty tough, I suppose. The blessing in life where, we lose a loved one, or you didn't get that job that you desperately needed, or something worse, you've lost a job, well, didn't get the job, or something tragic, And I was thinking, well, where's the blessing in that? Where is the blessing in that? And I think the thing is, it's about being tested, isn't it? It's almost being tested. Remember, from what we're taught, is that the Lord won't test us beyond our means, but we will be tested. We will be tested in the sense of our faith is tested. And I suppose when we end up in these situations, and I'm saying that people can lose faith, it's that we are being tested. And I guess it's a bit of the vantage point in which you look at these issues of how you're being sustained. And what am I being tested by? My trust in God, or me thinking he's let me down? Because at the end of the day, people go through terrible things. Look at the Ukraine. I'm by no means endorsing that as a justifiable war. No war's justifiable, but people are going through incredible hardship. People have always gone through hardship, and I know for a fact that people are sustained. The best thing I ever see is that when you go through hardship by turning to Christ, you are sustained through that. And I think it took me a while to work this out when I became a Christian, that to do things in my own power, my own control. And yeah, I'm often disappointed by that, but to trust in God. When these trials come to us, stay obedient to God. Let's have a look. Because God is doing the asking, obeying God is different to obeying the law or a human being. Is that on the basis of the fact we respect God more than any human being or any law? Spot on, Vicky. Let's have that. Yeah, we'll come back to that in a sec because I'll look at that again. And Kate, it's because we know who God is and won't let us down that we can obey. Yeah. Let's go back to because we know who God is and won't let us down. But we do sometimes feel let down, don't we? We do. I mean, yeah, we do feel let down. We do feel shortchanged. And I suppose that's the important thing, isn't it? Because we all go through it. We all go through it. And I know people have had a fair share of grief in the last 6 months. And yeah, they're tough times. It's a big ask, isn't it? It's not easy being a Christian. It really isn't. It isn't easy being a Christian, to be sustained and to keep the conviction to obey the Lord. I have a big respect for people that struggle. It's very human of people to struggle. It's really interesting. I don't have that many close friends. Maybe it's a trust thing. I think it's part of the ASD stuff. But I found that when you start talking about some of the deepest things that are going on in your life and talking to Christians, it's incredibly powerful how being encouraged to keep leaning on God could turn this around. Again, in prayer, talked about that for the last 2 weeks, haven't I? How prayer always makes you feel better. Yeah. It's interesting looking at Jesus's, how to obey Jesus. Love God, and love your neighbour. Before that was about 800 billion commandments, weren't there? This, that and the other. All replaced by Jesus. There's 2 commandments. Seems quite simple when you say it quick, but actually the depth of those is quite phenomenal, isn't it, really? So I wonder if, although I'm a bit late with this, Vicky, I hope that hasn't trashed your schedule for sermon writing. Let's have a look at this one. Rowo's coming with a stormer. God is the only one I know I have to obey, even when I can't see the way forward. It's really hard. It is really hard. You never obey me. Not that I ever try and make you do anything. Not that I ever obey you either. Yeah. Oh, but that's crazy though, isn't it? It's like you're thinking, I've got to obey God. Now we're going to get into the whole realm of discernment and believing what you think God's telling you to do, and you must go and do it. Oh no, brain fry now, brain fry. God is the only one I know I have to obey, even when I can't see the way forward. Yeah, but you know that the Lord's never going to ask you to go and do something you shouldn't really be doing. Like the vicar who ran off with his secretary because he said God told him to do it. Yeah, I don't think that's going to cut, really. I think that's not true. Right, so what else? Have I got any last notes? Rejecting people's skills. Well, we could have 30 seconds, well, a minute and a half about pandemic, rules in the pandemic. Did say we wouldn't get too much into that, but we did that, didn't we? We all stayed at home. We never went to hospital and watched our loved ones die. We all wore masks. We did quite well to obey the government in that, didn't we? Does anyone look back at that and think they should have done it different? Should we have objected to the rules? Here we are 2 years later. And now COVID's not even in the news anymore, is it? It's like we're all so busy talking about Ukraine. 6 months, what are we going to be talking about then? Bit crazy, isn't it? Yeah. I suppose the interesting point is with the COVID thing is no one really knew what on earth was going on. Everyone took the best safe course of action. And then as we started to get used to, well, did anyone ever get used to lockdowns? Some people have never come back to church, like the physical churches that Elaine was running, or run, since that. Right, we're at the last 50 seconds. Anyone want any concluding comments to put in? So look, some people did object to the rules. You're right, they did. They objected to the rules. Most of us followed them, didn't we? Because we did actually perceive it to be the right thing to do. We should be for the safety of others. Again, it's authority, isn't it? All I'll say as kind of, although we're running a slight few seconds over, the only thing I would say is that there's only one authority. There's only one authority, and a bit like Rob's saying is that we must turn to our Bibles. We must turn to our Bibles. The ultimate authority is God. And I guess if we're concerned about stuff, or if we wonder about stuff, we should just look that up and find it out in Scripture. Because the Bible's a bit good, isn't it? Sometimes it's application study Bibles and stuff where you can look up stuff like, certain things, and it points you to certain bits of Scripture. It's never wrong, is it? Am I the only one that kind of thinks that that's a bit mad from time to time? That you think, oh, I've got this thing I need to deal with, or I'll go look up in the Bible. And it's always right. Let's go over this last one. Some interpret them differently. That's, I guess, referring to some people did object to the rules. Yeah, well, let's just say that a lot of people some people made a lot of money out of the pandemic. Some people, all top to bottom, some people suffered massively, some people did well. Isn't that crazy? What a wonderful world we live in. Right, I'm going to leave it at that so people can go and get on with their Friday night. Get some fish and chips in. Oh, I have to go and get fish and chips now. Let's drop this message. Right, I should be on time next week. Yeah, should be on time next week. Everyone have a great weekend, and we will see you online on Sunday. Look forward to Vicky's sermon, and take care, everyone. See you soon.